What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to the SI Sooners podcast. You know what? We're going to tell you today who wins this week's Bedlam showdown and why, of course. Parker's got the lowdown on Oklahoma's newest scholarship offer, and it's not Mailbag Wednesday, but I'm going to answer the question for you. Are Big 12 defenses better than SEC defenses? Seriously. Also, yes, it's true. Kyler Murray is the miracle man and has invented his own play, has invented a name for his own play. We'll get to that in just a second. Parker, did you catch any of that Arizona Cardinals game just a few minutes before we started recording?
Well, yeah, John, and I tell you what, if you need to throw a Hail Mary, there are a few guys better equipped for a Hail Mary type of situation than DeAndre Hopkins. So, I mean, hey, Kyler Murray made a heck of a throw, but really all you got to do with a guy like that is just put it where he can get it. And so Murray managed to do that. Hopkins came down with a great catch, and, well, I mean, there you go. That's really Kyler Murray's signature moment in the NFL to this point.
Hail Hop doesn't really work for me. I'm thinking Hail Murray. Some folks on Twitter have already hit me up with that. Hail Murray. It's pretty good. I'm John Hoover. I'm in Tulsa. Parker Thune is over in Norman. Thanks for listening to the SI Sooners podcast. Of course, thanks for watching the SI Sooners podcast on my YouTube channel. We are a Sports Illustrated affiliate. If you think about it, I want you guys to please rate our podcast if you like it. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like or a comment, and please, by all means, share us on your social media channels. That always helps. Parker, let's get started with Oklahoma State. The Cowboys are basically in first place in the Big 12 right now. They are literally, technically, a half a game behind Iowa State, but they also beat Iowa State. So, Parker, I ask you, for a team that has lost twice already this season to both Iowa State and Kansas State, is Oklahoma State the toughest test on the schedule for Oklahoma this season? Yes or no?
Well, John, I think in terms of the three games that they have remaining on the schedule, obviously Oklahoma State's the biggest test. I mean, Baylor and West Virginia, you would expect that the Sooners are going to beat them handily. But I really do believe that Iowa State is the team that Oklahoma is going to see again in the Big 12 title game, and the team that's best equipped to beat Oklahoma. So I think if I had to look at this schedule top to bottom for the Sooners, knowing what I know now, I would say that Iowa State presented the biggest challenge to the Sooners. The way I look at it with Oklahoma State, John, let's be honest here. This team has beaten the Sooners twice in the last 15 years. Mike Gundy doesn't beat OU. It simply doesn't happen. And I know that Oklahoma State's coming into this game riding a little bit of a high horse, I would imagine. Number 14, the best-ranked Big 12 team in the country. But Oklahoma has made short work of the Pokes year in and year out, regardless of what these two teams look like coming into the matchup. The lone exceptions obviously being 2011, when Oklahoma State had their best team probably in school history, and in 2014 when a guy named Tyreek Hill provided his signature moment in a Cowboy uniform here in Norman. But as I look at this game, John, especially the way Oklahoma's playing right now, I don't even really view Oklahoma State as a challenge to them. I don't, because I look at how these teams match up at every position group, each slot along the field, and I don't know if I see one, save for the obvious caveat, you got Chuba Hubbard and Tylan Wallace, two of the top offensive skill position players in the country, but I don't know if at every other individual matchup, Oklahoma State has the edge. Their edge is Hubbard and Wallace, and so all Oklahoma really has to do, I think, is shut down Chuba Hubbard in this contest. Because if you put the ball in Spencer Sanders' hands, a guy that has been prone to turn the ball over in the past, a guy that isn't fantastic at taking shots down the field, to a guy like Tylan Wallace, I think Oklahoma has the chance to really exploit Oklahoma State's weaknesses in this contest. And we'll dive into this in much more detail, but no, if I'm being honest, I really don't see Oklahoma State as much of a challenge to the Sooners.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you. I think Oklahoma State is the best team on Oklahoma's schedule. I think they're the most dangerous team, even counting Iowa State, even counting the loss to Kansas State. Now, here's some game details. After both teams were off last week, Oklahoma comes into this game ranked number 18. OSU is ranked number 14. And yet, just like I told you last week, OU is favored by odds makers, Las Vegas, to win the game. I looked at the Vegas lines when they came out this afternoon. Turns out OU is actually favored heavily to win the game, Parker. Sooners by 10. It opened at 10. Within 30 minutes, it had moved 3 times. First to 9, then to 11, then back to 10. You sound like, the way you were talking earlier, you sound like Oklahoma's going to cover the 10.
Yeah, and I really do believe that. I think there's a reason why the spread is that high, especially given the fact that Oklahoma is actually ranked lower than Oklahoma State. Look, clearly the odds makers see a lot of the same things that I see, which is from a talent perspective, rankings aside, Oklahoma's a better team than Oklahoma State. And sure, the Cowboys have had a better start to the season. They slipped up against Texas. That was a game that could have gone either way. They could be undefeated right now. But they don't impress me, John. And this Oklahoma team didn't impress me to start the season, but they have really, really impressed me over the last 3 weeks, and I feel like they're finally starting to hit their stride, and we've talked about this time and time again. But especially now that Ramondre Stevenson and Ronnie Perkins are back in the mix, Oklahoma has the makings of a really, really scary team, and a Big 12 championship team at that.
Yeah, you make a good point with Ramondre and Ronnie, the best defensive player on the team, and for my money, the best offensive player on the team. Joining the team at mid-season makes a difference. And listen, there's no doubt Oklahoma's on a roll, okay? They beat the crap out of TCU. They beat the crap out of Texas Tech. And they beat the crap out of Kansas. I'm sorry, but those are 3 of the Big 12's 4 worst teams. You throw in Baylor, and that's your 4 worst teams. They're coming up, obviously. I'm talking about by record, by result, by the product on the field. Those guys aren't any good. TCU, Texas Tech, and Kansas. So let's be honest with ourselves, Parker, before we dive into this. Oklahoma State is not one of the 4 worst teams in the Big 12. Oklahoma State, one of the 4 best teams in the Big 12. And I still make the argument right now, Sunday night, for them being the best. I'm not saying they're the best. I still think Oklahoma is the team to beat. I think Oklahoma is the team that nobody wants any part of. But in terms of what's on OU's schedule, I think OU's it. I think they're the best team they face this season. And you know what? It's almost Thanksgiving, so it'll be appropriate, I guess, to say the Sooners have been feasting on some turkeys, Parker.
Some turkeys, John?
Some turkeys. Texas Tech, TCU, and Kansas are no measure for me. Listen, having Stevenson back is great. Having Perkins back is great. Being at nearly full health COVID-wise is great. But the 3 teams that they played are turkeys. The three teams that they just beat the crap out of, they're no measure for how good Oklahoma is. Oklahoma State is a good measurement for how good Oklahoma is. What say you?
I don't know, John. I don't. I don't know. At this point in time, let's think about this. I want to go back to Oklahoma State's Week 1 game against Tulsa, okay? Because that was a game that I think a lot of us emerged from watching that game really alarmed at how bad the Cowboys looked. Now, Tulsa isn't a half-bad team.
Number 25 in the country.
That's right, and it's the first time all 3 teams in the state of Oklahoma, FBS teams, have been ranked in the same poll since 2008. So the state of Oklahoma,
great note.
Yeah, showing out right now in the college football, or rather the AP Top 25 poll. But it really concerns me, John, that team still had a very real chance of losing to Tulsa in the late game stages. Because, as I mentioned, Tulsa's a good football team. Oklahoma State, if they're half the team that the Sooners are, why did they struggle with a team like that? Because it's an AAC opponent, John. And Oklahoma State came into the season with legitimate college football playoff hype. There were people out there saying that the Cowboys would be a college football playoff team. Now, as I look at them today, I see a team that has a college football playoff ceiling, but that realistically, on a week-to-week basis, does not play at that level. And I think you chalk that up to a couple things. Number one, Chuba Hubbard has not been nearly as dominant as he was last year, and it's because the Oklahoma State offensive line is really, really bad. And how well can a running back play when his offensive line isn't throwing blocks? And Tylan Wallace, maybe the best receiver in the country when he's healthy. I think Shane Illingworth is better suited to get him the ball than Spencer Sander is. My goodness, I can't talk, John. I'm not going to get up on my Shane Illingworth soapbox here. I'm really struggling. Do I remember how to speak English? I'm going to have to get this show back on track here, John. But I'm not going to get on my Shane Illingworth soapbox again. Spencer Sanders is a concern to me, and his ability to get Tylan Wallace integrated into this offense the way I believe he should. And so here's the thing about the Pokes for me. They have all the talent. I just don't see the chemistry at this point in time.
Yeah. Remember now, I was in Lubbock, I believe, and the Oklahoma State was playing Texas, if not for a superhero effort by Sam Ehlinger and a ridiculously mind-bendingly stupid roughing the punter penalty. Oklahoma State's undefeated right now, if not for those two things. Either one of those two things. If they just remove one of those two elements from that game, they beat Texas. They're undefeated right now, and we are talking about them for a possibility of making the playoff. Here's what we know about this Oklahoma State team, Parker. The Cowboys did take care of business 2 weeks ago against Kansas State. The score was only 20-18. And OSU was kind of lucky to win. They got an interception at the end, got a scoop and score. But when they did, and they did it without basically really two of their best players, Tylan Wallace, the All-American you mentioned, missed that game with what was called a mild muscle injury that he sustained in practice. And then Kobe Harvell-Peele, the outstanding safety, all Big 12 last year, he missed the game with a head injury. So, and then you got Tevin Jenkins, their all Big 12 candidate at right tackle. He was hurt against Kansas State. What we don't know, of course, is the status of those guys. We're going to talk to Mike Gundy tomorrow. Hopefully he sheds a little light this week on the availability of those guys, although if I were him, I wouldn't. Parker, would you? You think that might those three injuries and the way Vegas kind of knows these things with all the people they have roaming around on campus, you think that might have something to do with the huge opening line?
It could, John. And no, to answer your question, if I was Mike Gundy, yeah, I wouldn't give Lincoln Riley any more information than he absolutely needs, because that's what Lincoln Riley thrives on, right? That's what he's been saying for weeks and weeks and months about the whole COVID-19 situation, is he's not going to disclose any more details than he needs to. So, hey, if I'm Mike Gundy, I'm playing Lincoln Riley's game and not tipping my hand quite yet, because really your only chance to win this game, at least in my eyes, is to throw something at Lincoln Riley that he doesn't know is coming. And maybe if you withhold that information and you stay coy about everything going on behind the scenes there, maybe you get Lincoln Riley in a situation where there's something in the game plan that he didn't scheme for on Saturday, and that could be an advantage for Oklahoma State.
Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, I'm going to try to describe for you what I saw from Kyler Murray today. It will not be easy. Trade Pros Heat and Air in Oklahoma City. Whether you just need service or a mini split for your home office, studio, or man cave, or if you're finally ready to upgrade to a more efficient train system for your entire home, get a free estimate from Trade Pros for all your heating and air needs. Trade Pros earned a Best of 2020 award from Home Advisor and has nothing but 5-star reviews on Google. Go to TradeProsOKC.com or call 405-675-0176. Or just book your appointment on Facebook. Trade Pros, that's one word, Trade Pros Heat and Air. Follow SI Sooners on Twitter at @all_Sooners. Find Parker at Parker Thune. I'm at John E. Hoover. Our website, allsooners.com. We are part of the Sports Illustrated network. We're an affiliate, is what you call it. It's free to get on there, allsooners.com. No memberships, no subscriptions, no credit cards. Just get on there and read all the Sooner content. Man, we loaded up this week. Even though it was a bye week, we got tons of content on there. Find the video version of this podcast right here on my YouTube channel. That's John Hoover Media. Like I said earlier, please like, rate, comment, share. Those are important to us. We need that kind of support from you guys, especially the rate part. Okay, so here goes. I'm going to give this a shot. I've been a writer, professionally for the last 35 years, and I've written some pretty decent stuff. Some of it I actually like, believe it or not. But no, in my teachers in elementary school, they used to tell me, John, your creative writing, chef's kiss. One of those teachers, even I think it was Mrs. Davis, even told me she knew I was going to grow up to be a writer, right? So you think I would be okay with words? I have no idea how to describe what I saw today out of Kyler Murray. That kid, it just defies description. Kind of defies belief, to be honest. I said earlier, the Hail Murray, I love it. Here's the deal. Every week, for literally the last 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, we have heard over and over and over. Kyler Murray is the first quarterback in NFL history to do this, or the NFL history to do that. 300 yards passing and 100 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns and 5 touchdowns and this and that, all that stuff. He came into this week, and they played the Buffalo Bills today. He came into this week. He was the first player in NFL history with 2,000 yards passing and 500 yards rushing at the halfway point of the season. So basically, that means he's halfway to a, get this, 4,000, 1,000 season. All the years I've watched football, I never even conceived that this was possible. What if you had a quarterback? What if somebody came up with a quarterback who could throw for 4,000 yards and also rush for 1,000 yards? Wouldn't that be something? Michael Vick tried it. Cam Newton tried it. This is the NFL, people. This ain't college. He's doing it in the big boy league. And he's doing, like, literally the impossible, right? And then today, what does he do? He completely outdoes himself by throwing a game-winning Hail Mary with no time left, 1 second, I think, to beat the Bills. Josh Allen, he had thrown the go-ahead touchdown pass on the previous drive. 34 seconds left. You see Kyler Murray sitting over there on the bench. He's got his floppy hair down. He looks like he's all upset again. He's mad. He played great, but they couldn't get a first down late in the game, and they had to punt the ball away. And so, yeah, Allen brings Buffalo back, but Kyler's over there almost like he's pouting, and we've seen that out of him. He does not like losing. It eats him up. So keep in mind, Kyler was down 14 earlier in the game. He brought him all the way back, take the lead. He ran for 2 touchdowns, I think, in the third quarter. Just played great. But, yeah, he's all moping and he's upset, bad body language, whatever you want to call it. And then he comes in, throws like 3 quick completions in like 20 seconds, gets the Cardinals down to one last shot, and the dude just does it. Hail Mary. Hail Murray. Cardinals win 32-30. Parker, please. You're pretty good with words. Help me describe what this kid is doing.
John, here's the thing. Michael Vick is about the only quarterback that I've witnessed in my lifetime that comes close to displaying the type of potential and the type of ceiling that Kyler Murray has as a thrower and as a runner. Because he is wondrously gifted as a passer. But his ability to make guys miss in the open field, his agility, his quickness with the ball in his hands. I was talking to a friend the other day who told me that in his evaluation, Kyler Murray might be the best open field runner in the entire NFL, regardless of position. You watch the kid run around, you can't really argue with that. I mean, you can point to other guys that might be more elusive. You might point to running backs like Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, guys like that are more natural runners. But what Kyler Murray can do at the quarterback position and the skill set that he brings to the table just make him so hard to defend. And it boggles my mind, John, it really does, that there was legitimate concern that Kyler Murray's size was going to hold him back in the NFL. Because if you watched him on a football field, I think it was pretty clear that Kyler Murray doesn't need to be 6'4", 6'5", to be able to do the things that he does as a quarterback. He is special. And the fact that he does it all while standing 5'10", I don't think is quite as impressive enough as people make it out to be. Or I shouldn't say not quite as impressive. It's not quite as strange as people make it out to be. Because people act like Kyler Murray is this sort of dynamic offensive weapon that just happened to stumble his way into the quarterback position. But no, you watch Kyler Murray play, he's a quarterback who can run. He's not a running back who can throw. And that's what I believe distinguishes him from a lot of the other dual threat guys that have emerged as the NFL continues to move in that direction. And you look at today's game, you need a quarterback with some mobility. At least that's the common school of thought among NFL coaches and front offices. Everything is starting to move toward quarterbacks who can run the football as well. And Kyler Murray is one of the best examples of a guy that doesn't need to be built like a traditional quarterback, doesn't need to bring that traditional quarterback skill set to the table in order to be an MVP caliber, Hall of Fame caliber player. In many ways, he is the future of the quarterback position. I think gone are the days where you're going to see guys get drafted just based on the fact that they're 6'3", 6'4", 220 pounds and have a strong arm. You're going to start to see teams zig where they have zagged in the past and look for a guy like Kyler Murray that regardless of what the metrics say, regardless of what the measurements say about what kind of a quarterback he can be, they're going to look for a guy that can produce on the field, that can make plays, can make stuff happen. And Kyler Murray just makes stuff happen, John. And you saw that today. And the situation that he's in with Arizona, with Cliff Kingsbury at the helm and DeAndre Hopkins lining up outside, it is ideally suited to his long-term success. And the Cardinals really took a shot bringing in Cliff Kingsbury to be their head coach. But at the end of the day, I think it was the right call. I said it at the time, I'll say it again. When you have a player that's as unique as Kyler Murray, you need to have a coach with as unique a perspective as Cliff Kingsbury. And so I think those two are a match made in heaven. And they are doing some really special things out there in the desert. And make no mistake about it, Kyler Murray is very much in the MVP conversation right now in the NFL, and he's got the Cardinals in position a lot sooner than anyone would have expected to be contending for a playoff spot and maybe even a Super Bowl.
You did good. I asked you to describe that for me, and you knocked it out of the park. Well done. Michael Vick obviously comes to mind as a comp for Kyler. Michael Vick ran a 4.240 and was about a 56 to 59% passer. So that's as good as we can get comp-wise. And it's still not quite, you talk about a polished passer, what Kyler is, and you talk about a guy who's a jitterbug like Kyler is. I don't think there's ever been anybody like him, ever. Today he finished 22 of 32, 245 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Also ran for 62 yards in those 2 touchdowns on a couple of little read options, pretty slick. You know what? Big day for Baker Mayfield, too. Windy as heck in Cleveland today, and he basically played mistake-free. Baker did. 12 of 20, 132 yards, no turnovers. Huge for Baker, no turnovers. And he got Nick Chubb back, healthy. Browns had 2 running backs over 100 yards. They beat Houston by the old school score of 10-7 today. So, okay, Parker, let's talk OU recruiting. You caught up this week with the Sooners' latest scholarship offer. Big defensive end in the 2022 class. Tell me about your conversation with DJ Wesolak out of Boonville, Missouri.
Yes, sir. So DJ's small school kid. Boonville's a town of about 8,000. What he told me is that it's about 10 minutes outside of Columbia, so Missouri is the hometown school for him. And I would get the sense that they have the inside track to his commitment. But one of the things he emphasized to me is that Oklahoma and Texas are 2 of the schools that are making the hardest pushes and are being the most intentional about recruiting him. So you got a little bit of a feeding frenzy between the 2 rivals there. But Wesolak, for what it's worth, 6'5", 225 pounds, and a guy that is explosive as a pass rusher. And he's going to need to fill out his frame, obviously, if he's going to compete at the collegiate level. But you get him to the collegiate level, you get him a strength and conditioning coach, he puts on 20, 30, 40 pounds of muscle. He's a guy that has long-term NFL potential, and he's just kind of starting to break onto recruiting radars, and some of that may be due to the fact that he does hail from a small town, but he's a guy that's going to continue to garner Power 5 offers as the year progresses, and I think one of the guys that Alex Grinch is going to have his eye on, because what do we know about Grinch? He wants to recruit freakish athletes, and Wesolak is just that, 6'5", and I would imagine that Grinch is going to want him playing around 250, 260 minimum. And that's entirely attainable because Wesolak's just junior, class of 2022. So he's got room to grow, he's got room to mature, he's got room to improve. But I do believe he'll be a heavy target for the Sooners in this class of 2022.
Parker, this kid sounds like he's got an incredible work ethic and really a desire to be great. Tell me the story that he told you about waking up in the middle of the night and going and working out. Yeah,
so he was not joking when he said that he's going to try to outwork everybody. And the story he told me was over quarantine, he was working out at least twice a day. He told me sometimes he would just decide, you know what, I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night and I'm going to go work out. That's how committed he is to getting to the next level. He's a 4-sport athlete by trade. Football has kind of become the preeminent sport for him, just given the high-end potential that he's demonstrated on the gridiron. But he's a basketball player, he's a track athlete. And what do we know about these multi-sport guys, John? they're generally a lot more athletic than their peers at the position. And you watch Wesolak's tape, it's very much evident that background in basketball and track has helped his footwork, has helped his drive off the line of scrimmage, and has helped mold him into the elite pass rusher that he is today. And he's starting to earn offers from some pretty high-end programs, not the least of which is Oklahoma. So the Sooners going to go hard after him. They won't be the only ones. And it wouldn't surprise me if Oklahoma and Texas are two of his final 5 or 6.
I think I read Tennessee offered him, Iowa offered him, Penn State offered him. So, yeah, there's some big schools, big traditional powerhouses that are after him. That's interesting. It's early in the recruiting process for him, especially since teams can right now only go off tape. Parker, I wrote a story last week about the current state of college recruiting. I'd recommend you guys go find it, SI Sooners, allsooners.com. Coaches they're leaning on 3 things more than ever, okay? Video evaluations, what the kid has put on tape. Conversations with the high school coach. In other words, what level of trust do they have in believing what the coach is telling them, right? And then video conferencing, face-to-face. Coaches have FaceTime players for a few years now, so that's nothing new. But now that's opened up. It's open season, and they're on FaceTime, they're on Zoom, they're on Skype. They're trying to learn as much about these kids as possible before they offer them a scholarship. Because I want you to think about this. This is the crux of the story I wrote. The investment the kid is making in his college, where he's going to play football, he's going to study, he's going to get a degree, hopefully, right? He might meet his future wife on campus like I did. He might start a life of his own, right? Build a network of friends and, resources that he's going to lean into all his life, all that stuff. And then think about the investment that the coaching staff is making and the university are making in the kids. $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year for tuition, plus all the other resources like tutoring, medical assistance with injuries and rehab, stuff like that, athletic training facilities, workouts, counseling, all that stuff. And the coach and the player have never actually met each other. Okay? I talked to Lincoln Riley about this over the last couple of weeks. Not just Lincoln Riley, obviously, but every coach is doing this. None of these coaches are meeting none of these players, Parker. It's unbelievable that we're in this situation, and yet these guys are finding a way to make it work, or at least we'll find out in like 2023 and 2024 if they made it work in 2020 and 2021. Am I right about that, or am I oversimplifying?
Here's what I will say, John. I will not be surprised if circa 2023, 2024, that transfer portal is heavily populated, because there will certainly be players that realize that having committed in the era of Zoom and not having visited the college that they chose to attend, they're going to realize that the fit that they actually got when they got on campus wasn't what they imagined. So yeah, this is going to have a certain degree of implication years and years down the road. And I don't think, you look at a guy like Caleb Williams, who is absolutely sold, signed, sealed, delivered to Oklahoma. But then you got guys like Quinn Ewers, for instance, who committed to Texas for 2 months and then said, hold the horses on that. And so you're going to get a little bit of both, John. You're going to get guys whose interest in a particular school is solidified because of the way that school approaches this particular era in recruiting and navigates these circumstances. And we saw the Sooners land Nathan Rollins-Kabanji for that very reason. And you're going to have guys that are very much unsure of their decision, end up making a choice on a whim, and ultimately end up transferring a couple of years later because it wasn't what they bargained for.
Yeah, you're right. I agree. Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, something else I wrote this week. Are Big 12 defenses really better than SEC defenses? Did I really just ask that?
Hey there, loyal listeners. Parker Thune here with SI Sooners. Are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman, or a car dealership in Oklahoma City, or a restaurant in Edmond. Or maybe you're just a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise, and you want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonerssi@gmail.com or send us a direct message on Twitter at @all_Sooners.
Final segment of the SI Sooners podcast. Parker, I got a little flack, as I figured I would when you write something like this. When I asked the question if Big 12 defenses had, this year at least, caught up to SEC defenses. That's a story I wrote at allsooners.com. Now listen, I'm not stupid. I mean, maybe I am, but not about this. SEC defenses are better than Big 12 defenses. I know. I'm not making an argument otherwise. But I think we can all agree, Parker, the SEC, yes, the SEC plays better defense than the Big 12, but I think we can all agree the Big 12 is coming on. The Big 12 is changing the narrative. Parker, I just looked it up. Just a cursory glance, okay, tells enough of this story that we've been wondering about for most of the last two seasons. I remember asking Chris Kleiman, Matt Wells at Texas Tech. I remember asking those guys at Big 12 Media Day last year about the defenses in this league. I asked Matt Rule, I asked a couple coaches. And they all said, yeah, the Big 12 defenses are getting better. They said that last year. Now we're in 2020. The Big 12 is playing better defense right now than it has in 10 years. In 10 years or more. There are currently 6 Big 12 teams ranked in the NCAA's top 40 overall defenses. That's, the overall total defenses, average yards per game allowed. Okay, so there's 3 in the top 26. West Virginia is number 4. Oklahoma State is number 14. Oklahoma is number 26. Then you got Iowa State at 35. TCU's at 38. Baylor is at 40. You know how many SEC teams are in the top 40? 4. All right? While the Big 12, remember I just said, has 3 in the top 26. I just named those guys. The SEC has 0 in the top 26. 0. All right? So Texas A&M is 27. Georgia's 28. Kentucky's 30. And then, of course, Mike Leach's mighty Mississippi State Bulldogs are 33rd in the country in total defense. What? Alabama's 48th. Parker, times are changing, are they not?
Times are changing, John, but we have to acknowledge that 2020 is just bizarre. And so you have to take everything this year in college football with a grain of salt. For instance, the 3 8-0 teams in the country right now are Notre Dame, BYU, and Liberty. Notre Dame, you can believe. BYU, okay, it kind of makes sense. Liberty? Is that really where we're at here in 2020? There is so much, John, that has just been completely upturned by the COVID-19 pandemic. And shoot, Oklahoma is Exhibit A here, right? Who expected the Sooners to lose 2 of their first 3 games and drop out of the AP poll entirely? And so I get where you're coming from, and I certainly understand where the statistics fall. But what I'm saying, John, more than anything is don't let this year's statistics override the larger narrative simply because 2020 has just been the year of the unprecedented. And so I'm really taking everything very, very lightly at this point, John. I'm not taking anything seriously in college football in the year 2020. I have no idea who's going to win the national championship. I have no idea who's going to end up in the college football playoff. I don't really want to know. It's kind of nice not to know. I'm enjoying embracing the chaos, John. I'm loving this. This is the most fun I've had watching college football in years and years. We've finally got parity. We've got chaos week in and week out. And it's just fantastic entertainment. I love it. And I don't want to try to solve any of these problems. I just want to sit back and let it all play out.
I want to see BYU Cincinnati for the national championship. How about that? Or maybe Tulsa backs its way in, BYU Tulsa for the national championship. Now listen, I know there are certain metrics that are going to tell you a more complete story, obviously, than what the NCAA's total defense stat tells you. I know what those are. The points per possession, for instance, is a good one. Yards per play is another good one. Tackles for loss. Those are the ones that tell you who plays good defense and who doesn't. Okay, and I firmly believe that. But the Big 12 is performing better across the board in those categories too. My point is this. Let me backtrack just 1/2 a step. Come NFL draft day next year, Yeah, the SEC is going to put a lot more guys in the NFL on defense than the Big 12 is. I'm on board with that. I'm not arguing that point. But my point is this. Remember the days like 2 years ago where the Big 12 didn't have anybody in the top 40 of any category statistically, NCAA or analytics-wise or anything else? Like any at all. Maybe one. Maybe like TCU, right? Or Iowa State would get in there. Yeah, well, those days, I'm not going to say those days are gone. Like Parker said, it's 2020. You never know. But clearly, to me, the Big 12 has evolved defensively. I got the question today, too. Hey, Hoover, maybe it's the Big 12 offenses stink. No, most of the teams in the Big 12 have their quarterbacks back. There's a bunch of receivers in the Big 12 that are back. Some of the offensive lines, yes, did need rebuilding. But Oklahoma got all 5 guys back. Oklahoma State got a bunch of guys back before a bunch of guys quit. But no, I think that's a weak argument. That doesn't hold water with me that Big 12 offenses aren't any good. I think Big 12 offenses are very good. I've been watching them, especially yesterday. I watched both Big 12 games. I think they're fine. It's just that people in this conference are playing defense now. Here's another one I looked up, Parker. The SEC has 6 teams in the NCAA's top 35 in total offense yards per game. Offense. The Big 12 in the most 2020 stat of the year, the Big 12 has just 2. So you've got more SEC teams, 3 times as many SEC teams in the top 35 of total offense than you've got Big 12. That to me is the indicator that this is 2020. Parker, let's finish with this. College Game Day is coming to your city, so to speak. How fired up are you about this? When I worked for the paper, that used to be one of our main stories that we would go cover for the game. 7 a.m. you're down there when they're setting up the game day stuff, right? Or Friday night even. That made for a lot of late nights, a lot of early mornings for some people. But this year, you know what? COVID, no crowd, no tailgating. You going to be out there bright and early Saturday morning, Parker?
I'll be out there bright and early Saturday morning, John, but it won't be for ESPN College Game Day, that's for sure. And yeah, it is kind of weird, the fact that Game Day is coming to Norman for the first time in 8 years, but nobody can show up. It's just kind of an isolated set on the field with no fans, no signs, none of what we conventionally know to be College Game Day. So no, John, to answer your question, I'm not that excited because there's not that much to be excited about. They're doing the show in their own little bubble there, and it's not the same. And it's obviously, it wasn't going to be the same in 2020, but you don't get the environment of the location that they're in the same way that you did in years past when you had a rabid crowd in the background and signs all over the place and Pat McAfee jumping into the Brazos River at Baylor. Just everything about College Game Day, much like everything about the world of college football in 2020, John, has been so altered by the pandemic. And so, no, I will not be up bright and early on Saturday morning to go witness Game Day. I don't even know if I could access it if I wanted to, but I'm gonna be getting as much sleep as I can before that 7 p.m. kickoff between the Sooners and the Pokes.
Yeah, Parker, you mentioned 8 years since Game Day's been in Norman. Way back in 2012. Remember that? The Notre Dame game. Yeah, that one. Landry Jones kind of faded at the end. I think James Harden got traded that night. Anyway, it's the 38th time Game Day has been to an OU game, and OU tells us I think that's 4th all time. It's the 7th time they've done a Bedlam game, and OU is 6-0 all time against the Cowboys with Game Day in town. So they're probably going to win this game. That's a number that you tend to. I don't know if Vegas is going to lean on that one, but I'll go with it. You know what? And this is the time of the podcast right here where I would normally say something glib like should be fun, but like Parker said earlier, man, it's 2020, so who knows? I'm not so sure if it's going to be fun or not. On the whole Game Day and Norman thing, I'm kind of meh about the whole thing. Parker, we'll get more into the matchups in our next podcast on Wednesday, by the way. But tell me, you think Oklahoma is going to win this game? Exactly why Oklahoma is going to win this game?
I think Oklahoma is going to win this game because they're going to win the battle up front, John. I like Oklahoma's defensive line, the way that they're playing, to just completely overpower that Pokes offensive line. And how poorly they're playing is really not a good sign for Oklahoma State heading into this game, because if the Sooners have a strength at this point in the season, it is that defensive line with Ronnie Perkins and Nick Benito. And Spencer Sanders is going to have a heck of a time if he's being pursued all night long by those two fellas. And so I like the Sooners because I think they're going to get it done in the trenches.
I got OU. I don't think it'll be a 10-point game. Seems like those are kind of rare in Norman. I've seen a few of them. I see kind of a defensive game coming. I do really like Oklahoma State's defense. I think they're good enough to keep it close. I think you're right about OSU's offense. There's lots of question marks, but lots of potential. I see something along the lines of some of the scores we've seen in the Big 12 this year, like a 23-20, 28-24. Here's the thing. I do see OU's defense, whether it's pressure on the quarterback or somewhere else, getting some turnovers. They're going to get some gifts from Sanders Claus, let's call him. How cool is that? Spencer versus Spencer at the quarterback position. Sounds like an 80s detective show. But I think it'll be close. I think it'll be a close game, and I think a late turnover, a late special teams play is going to be the difference. You can listen to the SI Sooners podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts, or on your Amazon-enabled device. Just say, Alexa, play the SI Sooners podcast, or go to the SI Sooners website, sisooners.com, allsooners.com. Click on the player and listen on your phone, your tablet, your computer, whatever you like. You can always watch the video version of this here podcast on my YouTube channel. That's John Hoover Media. For Parker Thune, I'm John Hoover. See you guys.